Okay, so this lecture is basically on analytical methods of velocity and acceleration analysis. On the way, we will handle position analysis also, which we have done once. But the interesting thing about analytical methods of kinematic analysis is that while they are enormously powerful, the description of them and their outline is very small and simple. So that will take very less time. So I am in a position to fulfill the promise of the last lecture that one of the methods of solving the velocity and acceleration problems of complex mechanisms, I will show you by walking you through one example. And I have one example. So we will do that first and then we will go to analytical methods. Okay. So this example is from one of your earlier assignments in which you were asked to find out the configuration in which this ternary link BCD will be so positioned that BD will be horizontal. Now this happens to be this figure, this diagram happens to be my solution of it. Okay. Now here BD does not look horizontal, and that is because of the scan being skew. As you can see here, the top of the page was above and here the top of the page is here. So the scan and this side also did not come properly parallel to this side. So apparently the scan window has been a little skew. The tool that I use, the app that I use for scanning is actually not very accurate. It needs me to position the corners, and the corners are not easily handled. Their least count is very high. So that is why this is not really looking horizontal. And some of the directions also will not look proper, but the diagram actually has been made to scale properly on paper. At least up to the paper level, it was perfect. I mean, as perfect as you can do with graphical construction. So this is supposed to be the configuration in which BD was horizontal, but you take it as the given configuration, whatever it is. And you see two branches of BA because part of the problem was whether the configuration is unique, though the answer was that no, it was not unique. These two branches were possible. So in this example of method of normal acceleration, we will take this as the configuration, this one, the right configuration. Okay. So this A1 is what we will take as the given configuration and not this. Fine. And the problem is that this input link is rotated at angular velocity 1 radian per second and 0 angular acceleration. That means it is run with uniform angular velocity, and we have to find out the velocity and acceleration of this slider D, which is the output link. Now here is the issue that makes it complex, because if you position this point here, position is known for every point, but then the velocity, the acceleration, the same issue will recur. That is, this point's details we know because input of that has been given. Now from there up to back to the frame or back to a known point is one link, two link, and slider, three link, not dyad, triad, and that makes it complex. So starting from here, you cannot determine this. Starting from here, can you determine this? The angular position of this, angular position, velocity, acceleration, etc. of this. Again, start from here up to this point, you know. One link, two link, again three link. Very sad. In this loop, if you try, then one link. Now here no input is known. This is a 4-bar loop. Okay, frame, link 5, link 4, link 6, only 4-bar loop. But the problem is that none of the data is available in this loop. So again, movable link 1, 2, 3. So whichever loop you are going, you are finding 3. And that makes it a complex mechanism. Okay, and we will see how to solve it step by step. However, make note that this is complexity of low degree. Why? Because if the input were not here, if the input were somewhere here or here, then it would not be complex. Keeping everything same except changing the input link, if that makes it a simple mechanism, then you say that it is low degree of complexity. Take the input here and then you can put everything proper. By use of this input, you position this and then you cut an arc on this line and you get position of this. After that, you position the ternary, you come here, and once you position the ternary, then you can position this dyad. So at every stage there is a dyad. After knowing this, you first fix this dyad, then you fix this ternary, which is again a dyad, and then finally fix this dyad. So this is low degree of complexity, and that is the issue, because method of normal accelerations. Method of normal accelerations is applicable to only low degree of complexity. Okay, only mechanisms with low degree of complexity, and this is one such. That is why it is applicable here. Another thing, you make note that it is applicable only to single degree of freedom mechanisms. So this method is basically a limited method. Okay, the other two methods, auxiliary point method and Goodman's indirect method, they are more general. Okay? So how does single degree of freedom help, and how does low degree of complexity help? Low degree of complexity helps because of the procedure itself requires a change of input. Okay, single degree of freedom helps because of the underlying principle. See, if the mechanism has a single degree of freedom, then while you continuously operate it, every point on every link of the mechanism would traverse its own characteristic trajectory. Continuous operation does not have to be on full cycle, but even over a little extent. So every point of every link will execute its own trajectory because there is a single degree of freedom. So the point is constrained to move on its own curve. It cannot go outside that thin curve. Okay, it is channelized. In that sense, a single degree of freedom mechanism is called a constraint mechanism. Okay, so on such a mechanism, every point traverses its own trajectory. Fine. Now, if you run the mechanism with different velocities, then the traversal will be with different rates. That is, with time, the schedule of when does it go to this point, when does it go to that point, and so on, that will change. But the sequence of points will be same. That means the trajectory will be same. the curve will be the same. So suppose this is the curve on which a particular point travels, and configuration is known. That means at which point on this curve that point under question currently is sitting, that also is known, and the curve is known. So since the curve is known, at this point the radius of curvature, I mean known means maybe you and I don't know, but it is determinate, it is fixed. It cannot go to some other curve. It has its own characteristic curve, and that has got settled that moment when the mechanism was assembled. So we don't know the curve, but whatever is the curve, that is fixed. So if right now it is here, then with whatever velocity you move, it will go to these points. Okay, in that sequence it will travel, and this trajectory, this curve at this point has its own curvature and radius of curvature. And if that point is right now moving with a velocity v in this direction, of course, that is how this is the trajectory. So the velocity is typically the velocity is tangential to this curve, okay, and the acceleration of this point here now will have two components. One will be tangential and the other will be normal. That is tangential to its trajectory, tangential to its path, and normal to its path. The normal acceleration is this v square by rho, and this is the key. Why? Because this normal component of the acceleration of p, we are talking about absolute acceleration. This is the curve on which the point p actually moves. So the normal component of the acceleration, that is that component which is perpendicular to its velocity, actually does not depend on any of the acceleration quantities by which you may decide to drive the mechanism. It is dependent only on the velocity. Fine. And this is the key with which, even without knowing the rest of the acceleration, the normal components of the absolute accelerations we can figure out, and that helps in constructing the acceleration diagram. But before that, we have to make the velocity diagram. And why it will work only on single degree of freedom mechanism? Because for a single degree of freedom mechanism, it is necessary that every point is going to move on a specified trajectory. For a 2 degree of freedom mechanism, a point is capable of moving on a continuous area, and in that area it can traverse any curve, and that will depend on the ratio of the velocities and accelerations. Okay, so that constrained motion of on a single curve will not be there anymore. That is why it is applicable only for single degree of freedom mechanisms. Fine. So how does the method work? First, you take a suitable alternative input link to render the mechanism simple. That simple word is missing here. Okay, it should be simple. So by changing the input link, you make the mechanism simple. But you don't know that input velocity. Don't worry. You assume any velocity. Okay? I mean, even the quantitatively velocity you don't have to assume. You have to say that whatever is the angular velocity of that, with that angular velocity, whatever is the velocity of the next connection point, that velocity right now on my paper I am representing by 5 centimeter or 2 centimeter, whatever suits your paper size and so on. And what does that mean? That means you don't know its velocity, and you are on your own putting 2 centimeter or 5 centimeter for that velocity vector on your paper in your velocity diagram, that means it is the scale that you don't know yet. Okay, you will construct the velocity diagram, but without knowing the scale. Okay, so complete the velocity diagram starting from the alternative input totally at up to the end. Till that you don't know the unknown scale, which is unknown. But after completing it, you see that whatever is the velocity of the point which you would have otherwise known from the actual input, that velocity also in your velocity diagram will appear in some length, and from there work out the scale. And then comparing with the known motion of the actual input link, determine the scale of the velocity diagram. The moment you determine the velocity diagram scale, all the quantities in the velocity diagram you can figure out in correct values. After putting the actual input at the correct value, you determine the scale. Based on that, you determine all the correct velocities. And many of these correct velocities will be needed to work out segments in the acceleration diagram for normal components. So now first, draw a wrong acceleration diagram, which is an auxiliary acceleration diagram, with all the true velocities which you now know, and zero acceleration of the alternative input link. And the actual input link, whatever acceleration it may have been given, that you disregard, because since you are giving zero or whatever acceleration to some other link, to the original actual input link you cannot give any input. So whatever acceleration turns out from that, you have to take, and that is why it will not be correct in any case. It will, that is why you call it auxiliary acceleration diagram. And from the auxiliary acceleration diagram, determine the normal component of the absolute acceleration of key points of those links for which you did not know the details. Okay, floating link basically, which is neither pivoted nor sliding, not executing pure rotation or pure translation. That is a floating link. So key points of that floating link, for that, for the absolute acceleration, you work out the normal components. After doing that, then you start drawing the actual acceleration diagram. True. Okay. While drawing the actual acceleration diagram with true input, starting from the proper input link, at some point of time you will get stuck because it is non-dyadic complex mechanism. But then one extra input, one extra information you will get from these normal components that you have pilfered from the auxiliary acceleration diagram. Okay. Now let us see the example to understand how it works. I think you have to manage seeing things a little smaller. Yes. So whatever is written here, you can read later at leisure, but right now, let me explain to you. Oh no. Rather than this input link, you take this as input link. First, the velocity diagram. You don't have to say this input link is rotating at 1 radian per second or 4 radian per second or 3 radian per second, anything. You just say whatever angular velocity with which link 5 is rotating, with that whatever is the velocity of C, we will represent it by 2 centimeters, because anyway scale we will determine later. So 2 centimeter made like this. Done. After the velocity image of point C you have found, then you say that relative to C, the velocity of D will be perpendicular to CD. So using your set squares, draw a line perpendicular to CD. And you don't know clockwise and anti-clockwise, so you draw it on both sides. But then, this being a 4-bar loop, from here you actually know in which direction the velocity of d will really be. That will be in vertical direction. So from the velocity pole in the vertical direction, you draw another line. And wherever these two lines cut, that will give you the velocity image of d. So the velocity of d will be velocity of c plus relative velocity of d relative to c. Or directly you can say in this direction something. Wherever they cut, velocity of d you have got. So you have placed this. After this, c you have located, d you have located, and velocity image of this ternary will be a scaled image of this ternary. So whatever is the angle c and angle d, you make that angle here, and complete the triangle to get the point B here. After you get the point B, then you say that relative to B, the velocity of point A will be perpendicular to BA. So perpendicular to BA, you draw this. This way also, both ways it could be. But this point A has to have a velocity, absolute velocity, perpendicular to OA, O2A. So perpendicular to O2A, draw another. Now you know the magnitude of this, but don't use that known magnitude, because now everything is conforming to what you have put here. Okay, so you place it wherever it cuts. So now A you have got. After you have got A, then you say that this vector OA should represent the true velocity of point A, which you know, 1 radian per second into this. Okay, and you measure this on your paper, these many millimeters, and you know that it will be 2 centimeter per second. Equate them, you get the scale of the velocity diagram. And the moment you get the scale, you know this velocity, which you started with, you know every other velocity. So determine all the velocities. Okay. So this outline says the order in which you are going to determine things. So OC equal to VC, we determine this. Then C to D, D to O to D, cut, get D. Then knowing C and D, you complete the triangle, get B. Then O to A, B to A gives you A. Then measure OA, which is known velocity VA, get the scale, and hence get all the other relative and absolute velocities, whichever is needed. And from there, now you can find out acceleration diagram. First the auxiliary acceleration diagram, and then with the help of that, the true acceleration diagram. So you start again with the true velocities and zero angular acceleration of this input link. Okay. So true angular acceleration, true velocities and zero angular acceleration. So then relative to O5, the acceleration of C will be normal in this direction and tangential in a perpendicular direction. But tangential acceleration is zero if you take zero angular acceleration of this. So this normal. For the auxiliary acceleration diagram, I have put 2 primes. For the correct acceleration diagram, it will be single prime. So O double prime, C double prime, this way, from C to A. So C has been located. Then from C, you proceed towards D. That will be centripetal, that is normal component of the relative acceleration, from D to C, from this way. Okay. So From here, you draw the vector this way. Okay, and that magnitude you know, that is velocity of d relative to c square divided by length cd. So this you know, and in the perpendicular direction, a tangential acceleration, tangential component of the relative acceleration also will come. So draw it as long as possible, both sides perhaps. This side will be useful because from O, the absolute acceleration of d will be vertical. So this way, if you go vertical, it will never meet this. Okay, so you come this way, so you meet this and get d. Now you have got C and D, and BCD is a ternary link. So making the angle C here, angle D here, you go and cut B here, and that is enough. Beyond B, you don't need to go in the auxiliary acceleration diagram, because it was the BCD which was the floating link on which, on some point, for some point, you needed to pilfer some extra information, and this is one such point. Okay. Now, what is the direction of velocity of B? You see this, OB. Okay, this is the direction of velocity of B. Now, for the acceleration of B, O to B, O double prime to B double prime. This is the acceleration vector of B, as you have found in the auxiliary diagram, auxiliary acceleration diagram. In that, this is the component along the velocity, which is the tangential component of the absolute acceleration. You see, we are connecting O to B. That means we are talking about absolute acceleration here. So the trajectory of the point B is currently going in this direction. This is the tangential direction because velocity direction is that. Okay. So in that acceleration, whatever is the acceleration component, that is tangential acceleration, and that is most probably wrong because we have used wrong information to construct it, wrong acceleration information. But we have used all true velocity information. So the normal component, this one is right. Okay, this is the important information that we have got. So this ABN, normal component of the absolute acceleration of point B, we have got correctly, and this will be useful. So this is correct outcome out of a wrong construction. Keep this and now go and make the true acceleration diagram. Here, starting from O, O2 now. Okay, correct acceleration, correct velocity, correct acceleration. So the input acceleration given is 0 and velocities we know. So based on the velocities in the direction from A to O, this is the centripetal acceleration as usual, and that is the velocity image of A prime, correct, based on the correct input. The perpendicular component did not come in this case because that has 0 angular acceleration as specified by the input. Then relative to A, you try to position B. The for the relative acceleration, the normal component, then for which you know the magnitude, the tangential component for which you don't know the magnitude. So you dash 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 draw a line in the correct direction, and that is where it hangs. But now it doesn't have to hang anymore because you know this normal component of the absolute acceleration. So from the acceleration pole, draw that normal component up to the correct magnitude, which you now know because you have pilfered from there, and then the tangential component you don't know. So dash 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 dash. So wherever these two dashed lines meet, that is giving you the correct acceleration image of point B. Fine. Now from B towards C, you start For the relative acceleration, you know that normal component. Draw that, and then the tangential component you don't know. And for C also, the normal component of absolute acceleration you know from C towards O, velocity of C whole square divided by OC, O5C. So that you draw now here, and then run in the O. No, that is this little thing from O prime to C. I mean this little small segment, that is the from C towards O5, and then in the perpendicular direction for the tangential acceleration, tangential component of the absolute acceleration, you draw like this. And wherever it meets this other locus of the acceleration image of C, you get the acceleration image of C there. And then you have got B and you have got C in the acceleration diagram. Complete the triangle BCD. And then this O prime D prime gives you the acceleration of point D, which you wanted. And velocity of point D you have already got from here. So this is how method of normal accelerations work. Okay, so it took quite a bit of time, but don't worry, the other side will take less time. Here I will take a little break. So I will stop recording for half minute or 1 minute and come. Okay, now analytical method, general discussion. Why I say general discussion here? Because in 2 rounds earlier, we have actually discussed the analytical methods in some context. Once originally in the context of position analysis, and then once actually in the context of velocity analysis also, we have discussed it. I would just quickly remind you. You see, we discussed these issues. Position transformation from known to unknown is nonlinear, often multi-valued. For the 4-bar, it was like this. We knew that. Actually, we knew that at the time of discussing this. Then, velocity transformation is purely linear. Okay, and for 4-bar, it will be like this. And purely linear means there is no additive term either. So all the velocity terms of the mechanism will be proportional. And that is why in the normal acceleration method that velocity analysis worked, because it was only the scale which remained unknown, but with that unknown scale the entire velocity components, all the velocity components were correct. Okay. So proportionally they were correct. So the proportion you get right even if you don't know the scale. Acceleration transformation is linear with an additive velocity dependent term, and for 4-bar it was like this. So this we discussed earlier, and that is all there is for analytical methods of kinematic analysis. Okay, so let me elaborate that now here in a general context. So denote the number of independent loops in the mechanism as k. In the 4-bar example, there was a single loop. Now here, loops can be independent loops, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Total number of coordinates, total number of coordinates. See, the loops we are talking about independent, coordinates we are talking about total number. Suppose that is n, and that means then you write one loop closure equation for every loop with k loops. That will be k loop closure equations. Break them down into scalar components. So you get 2k scalar equations in these n coordinates, basically, not necessarily n unknowns, n variables. Okay, n coordinates or n variables. And degree of freedom is n minus 2k. That is the degree of freedom of the mechanism. So if n is same as 2k, that will mean that you have got 2k equations and n which is same as 2k, then 2k unknowns, then you can completely determine that even without, I mean, I don't have to tell you any of the variables. Okay, so that means it is not a mechanism, it's a structure, 0 degree of freedom. If n happens to be less than 2k, that means the degree of freedom is negative, and that means it is not only a structure, it is a statically indeterminate structure. So for a mechanism, f is typically positive. Okay, so n is larger. So whatever is the difference, that is the degree of freedom, that many inputs you need, and that is why for solution of the position equations you need to specify that many variables. Okay, so these 2k scalar equations in n unknowns or n variables rather, you can say as phi I of theta 1 to theta n and the kinematic parameters of the mechanism that equal to 0. These are typically implicit functions. So I running from 1 to 2k. So 2k equations you have got. And with f coordinates known, the rest of the 2k unknowns you have to solve from these 2k equations. System of nonlinear equations. In the rare, simple, very simple cases, you might be able to pick up f of these variables suitably and express the other variables in terms of those basic f's. That is very simple, ultimately trivial cases. So then you can say suppose 2 degree of freedom. So two of them you select, theta 1 and theta 2 properly. Whichever ones are suitable, you name them as 1 and 2. Others will be 3, 4, 5, 6. Then you can say that theta 3 is this function of theta 1, theta 2. Theta 4 is that function of theta 1, theta 2, and so on. I mean, you could do that in very simple cases. In other cases, you have to work out a numerical representation of that. So, partial reduction is always possible. Otherwise, the full set of the equations. The complete reduction is mostly not possible. Only in very simple rare cases it is possible. But partial reductions often possible. So suppose there are 3 loops in the mechanism. So you have got 6 equations, but it is possible to condense some of the coordinates very easily, express them in terms of 2 others to get that out of the equation, and then you have got 5 equations in 5 unknowns. Something like that in some situations can be done. So partial reduction is often possible. So whatever number of equations remain in the number of unknowns, because f of them are known, the rest of them are unknowns. You can use Newton's method or more sophisticated and secure methods. Secure means with guaranteed convergence. Newton's method does not have the guarantee of convergence. Okay, so either Newton's method or more sophisticated methods of nonlinear equation solving, you can use that. This is position. Continue. Differentiate that. Our standard technique. Any position equation we differentiate to get the velocity equation. So those equations phi I, you then differentiate del phi I del theta j arguments, the same arguments into theta j dot. So derivative with respect to time. So all of them for all j's you add up, and then you have got this equation. And for I equal to 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 2k, you will have 2k such equations. And now all the positions are solved, because only after solving all the positions you can talk of solution of velocities. Then here all the velocity components are there, velocity quantities are there, and this will be a homogeneous equation, because velocity transformation is purely linear. So on this side it is 0, not even a constant. Now these many 2k such equations you get. Okay, so if you organize them in 2k rows and terms, you get these many, as many are there, n. So therefore the coefficients, when you organize and put this list as vector, then you get this matrix vector equation. This is symbolized as j for Jacobian. So for 2k equations, 2k derivatives you will have. So 2k rows here, and n variables are involved. So n rates will be involved here. So their coefficients n columns. So 2k by n matrix here and this vector. Now here n is a little larger. Okay, 2k plus f is n. So it is a square matrix plus a few more columns, f columns more. So the known components of this, if you separate out, and the unknown ones you leave here, and the columns corresponding to this you organize here. There will be a 2k by f submatrix, and the remaining square 2k by 2k component part will be here. Okay, this will be 0, and now this known part is you. If you separate out, then on this side you will have left j2 times theta unknown dot. On that side you will have minus j1 theta known dot, and then you solve the system of linear equations, which symbolically we have written like this. And that is how you can get the unknown velocities. You see, this is not nonlinear equations. Velocity is just solution of linear equations. Okay, a system of linear equations. Inverse actually you do not have to compute. If you solve j2 into theta dot unknown is equal to minus j1 theta dot known, that solution of linear system is enough to give you the solution here. You don't have to actually invert a matrix, which is a much more costly business. Now, there are two kinds of singularities. If this J1 matrix is rank deficient, okay, if J1 is rank deficient, then it might happen that with some given known velocities, if that is in the null space of this rank deficient matrix, then J1 times this may be 0. And in that case, J2 times this will be 0, whereas J2 is non-singular. Okay, so theta unknown dot will be 0. That means with some known inputs, non-zero inputs, output is 0. And that is that kind of a configuration where this happens. You see, this will happen at some configurations where this is 0. That means that will be equations on thetas, right? So they are called stationary configurations where some degrees of freedom are lost. On the other hand, if J2 becomes singular rank division, here since it is square, so you can say singular, then there will be some motion of the output which multiplied with this will give you 0, and that means input is still 0. Okay, so that means even without an input you are getting an output. So in some alignments it might happen that alignment is such that even without input velocities output may have some velocity. Okay, so these are actually uncontrollable or uncertainty configurations. Here some degrees of freedom are transitorily gained. So this transitory loss and gain of degrees of freedom happens at the configurations of rank deficiency of this or that. Okay. So this much is the velocity component. So wherever J2 is not singular, you can do that. If J2 is singular, then you cannot do this. Okay. Then you differentiate this. Okay. Or based on this itself you can start. Okay. If you have already got it in this form by doing this inversion, okay, then based on this actually you can try to differentiate this directly, or you can differentiate it on this original one. From the simpler form of the equation where you have in the second one, in which theta unknown dot you have expressed as J2 inverse J1 negative of that, those coefficients are here shown as gammas, okay, times theta dot. This gamma is actually this minus J2 inverse J. Okay. So if you differentiate this, then you will get this directly, that is this times double dot plus derivative of this, with respect to theta L times theta L dot. So over else also you have to sum them. So it will be a double sum. Okay. Either you do it this way, or from the general form, this velocity relationship, you directly differentiate all of them together, known unknown together. Okay. So it will be this thing into theta j double dot summed up this sigma plus, now keep this constant and differentiate this. So you will get del 2 phi I by del theta L del theta j, that is this, the second derivative matrix, cross derivatives get involved here, into theta L dot times this, okay, like this. So this one, or here this one, actually involves all the centripetal and Coriolis terms of the acceleration. So when L and J are same, here or here, they are the corresponding centripetal terms. Okay, omega square something. When this L and J are different, then you have those 2 omega cross velocity kind of thing. Angular velocity of one, linear velocity of one. So Coriolis terms you get when L is not equal to J. So all the centripetal and Coriolis terms, basically the quadratic velocity quadratic terms you get here, and the direct acceleration terms you get here. From here, whatever is known, you supply that, and the unknown ones you can solve by solving the arising system of linear equations. That's all there is in analytical methods of kinematic analysis. And based on this, you can make a nice formulation and you can implement it in a program also. Okay. So that's it. We stop it here, and in the next lecture we will go to dimensional synthesis of